Okay, so I'm going to start with a little autobiography. Just let me just arrange my screen. Okay. In the beginning, once upon a time, there was a girl who had a fairy godmother. Her fairy godmother taught her how to sew. She taught the girl many textile and craft skills. The girl loved her fairy godmother very much. The fairy godmother unwittingly sowed the seeds of the girl's creative life. The fairy godmother lived alone, a self-sufficient working woman. The girl associated textiles and making as the activities of an independent modern woman. Once upon a time there was a girl who liked to knit. Her fairy godmother brought her wild knitting. Wild knitting contained patterns for subversive knitted items, pot plants and scarves in the form of armadillos. The girl also loved the knitting pattern books by the designer Patricia Roberts. The girl couldn't afford Patricia Roberts' woolly bear yarns, so she had to use cheaper brands. The girl knitted some of her sweaters. The patterns were difficult. The girl was good at knitting. The girl won a national hand knitting design competition when she was 17. Once upon a time, there was a girl whose parents appeared completely conventional, but who harboured a great curiosity about the world. The girl's family didn't travel far, rarely leaving the south of England. But wherever they went, they visited independent, idiosyncratic places. The girl's family made day trips at the weekend. The girl's father liked motoring, and her mother liked to get out. The girl's family often visited Mr. Potter's Museum of Curiosities. When the girl grew up, she went to an auction and bought some of Mr. Potter's taxidermy. Most years, the girl's family drove to Cornwall for a 2-week holiday, with suitcases wrapped in polythene strapped to the roof rack. The girl didn't realise that not everyone went to Cornwall for their holiday. Apparently, other destinations were possible. It always rained, so they always visited the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle. The girl loved it. When the girl grew up, she took her own family there. They loved it too. Once upon a time, there was a girl who had a mother who collected things. Not many things, not valuable things, but things that were easy to find and affordable. Bells, ducks, and walking sticks mainly. Strange choices. The girl doesn't know why, and it's too late to ask. The mother didn't like making things. She liked shopping. Once upon a time, there was a girl who borrowed a library book. The book was called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E. L. Konigsberg. The book tells the story of 2 children who ran away to live in a museum. The girl wanted to live in a museum. When she grew up, she decided that she wanted to live in the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. This wasn't possible, so the girl turned her house into a museum. When she grew up some more, her husband built her and their daughter a museum. They moved in, and if you believe in fairy tales, they all lived happily ever after. Once upon a time there was a girl, and that girl grew up to be me. So that's my potted autobiography for you, just to give you a little bit of background about the work I make and possibly why I make it. So now I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through some of my practice. This presentation is divided up into themes, and the first theme is eyes, And this is actually a piece of fabric that I made when I was studying for my MA at the Royal College of Art in 1988. And this was done on an industrial knitting machine using a jacquard technique. And quite, oh, you're going to see in a minute, there's quite a lot of my work over the years has kind of referred back to the theme of the eyes. The following two works are much more recent. They're about 10 years old, and they are made from they're assemblages that are made from materials as opposed to constructing works through complex knitting processes. And these works were made in the period immediately after my husband and I had finished building our own home. So as you saw just now, those images were of the 16th century timber frame barn that we live in Essex. Undertaking this physically and emotionally enormous building project left me desperate to make works quickly. And so I began making and resolving works with what was to hand, my materials and my samples and surpluses, things donated, inherited, and found, which emerged as we unpacked all of our possessions. The contents from our London flat and studios that had been in storage for 18 months while we were doing the build. So in this piece, I'm using a piece of agate. Uh, it's the kind of object that I hate the most, and I do apologize if you own this object yourself and you love it. It's a piece of agate that has been turned into a tea light holder, giving a spurious function. Agate's a beautiful thing, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why things have to be functional to be appreciated. So I've used knitted samples plus materials inherited from my godmother and antique jewelry and coral. So you can see the little coral that's making the veins around the edge of the eye that's inherited from my mother. Towards the end of her life, my mother started just giving me stuff. Every time I saw her, she would give me stuff to kind of save and take away. And so I've become the kind of family owner of these objects. And I guess I've always felt a personal attachment to the symbol of the eye. I've had really poor eyesight ever since I was a child, and I now have an eye condition which I need to ensure I keep on top of so I don't lose my sight. But obviously, being a visual artist, my sight is crucial to the work I make. And this is another eye piece again, which is made from found materials, donated materials. You can see there's a kind of knitted sample there. And again, small bits of jewelry that I, again, like I said before, inherited from my mother. And so in this work, I've also incorporated wood that surrounds me in my life in the Essex countryside. We live on a farm. I live in a wooden building. There are huge stacks of wood everywhere, stacked up on the yard. We have trees growing on the farm. We even chop down the trees to produce our own wood chips to heat our home and water. Wood is absolutely everywhere. And so it was inevitable that it would end up in my work. And that very first piece of work I showed you, you can see here, and this is the British ambassador's residence in Ankara in Turkey. And in 2021, that piece was purchased by the UK government art collection, and it was installed at the ambassador's residence in 2023. This again is using the symbol of the eye. It's a very recent work, 2022. It's a hand knitted, almost human height eye, and it's knitted from the softest yarn you can buy, which is super synthetic. It does have a bit of mohair in there, but it's predominantly nylon, polyester, and lurex. And when I knit these works, I don't sit in front of the television and knit. I sit on a hard chair in my studio and knit as a very separate activity to the rest of my life. I really enjoy that separation from the domestic into the studio. And more recently, I've become obsessed with listening to really dreadful true crime podcasts. But what happens as I knit, as many of you will understand when you work with your hands, is you very quickly get into flow. And then I'm not listening anymore. And it doesn't matter because the podcasts are terrible. If I listen to anything of consequence, I lose concentration. So the next image is these were some preparatory drawings and collages that I was doing when I was trying to think about how I wanted this piece of work to look and be. My work is often anthropomorphic with kind of human elements added to it. It's humorous, but it's also deadly serious. As I explained in my biography, I've always knitted. I've knitted since I was a child. Making in particular knitting, in particular knitting has become my way of interpreting, communicating, and coming to terms with the world that we inhabit. For me, it sits between me and my internal world and the physical world around me, like some form of comfort or rather discomfort blanket. This is a piece of work from 2005. Do I fit in? I've done a lot of work with very kind of bold, short, sharp statements. And this piece of work was very much expressing the idea of how I felt as a human being and how I felt as a person and a woman fitting in the world, but also about my practice with knitting. How does that fit into the craft world? How does that fit into the art world? I always think I'm the wrong kind of knitter, the wrong kind of artist, the wrong kind of craftsperson, the wrong kind of woman. I feel like I'm always in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I've also been looking at more broadly at knitting, and this is something called the knitting equation. And it was produced by someone called Betsan Corkhill, and she's a research and personal well-being coach with a background in physiotherapy. And I heard her talking on Radio 4 in an interview called Knit One, Heal One, where she was talking about the importance of knitting in her life and how when her mother died, she felt that the knitting she had done during the grieving process had really helped her heal. So she's been researching the use of knitting for its therapeutic benefits since 2005, and she's been developing it into a tool to improve well-being and particularly to manage long-term medical conditions in mainstream healthcare. She's furthered her research through a partnership with Dr. Jill Riley and the School of Healthcare Studies at Cardiff University. And she's founded this organisation called Stitch Links UK to promote the research to enable anyone and everyone to benefit freely from its findings. And she's also published a book called Knit for Health and Wellness, How to Knit a Flexible Mind and More. And if you look at the Stitch Links site, you can read this research and also see an overwhelming range of messages and narratives by people who knit. So they carried out a survey where over 3,000 knitters from 31 countries responded. And the kind of overwhelming responses they got, regardless of the different cultural, educational, or health backgrounds that knitters were coming from, was that knitting was an accessible tool and it had benefits for all aspects of our well-being, physical, emotional, and social. And that's really how I find knitting to be for me as well. It's not only, I suppose, my profession and the way I express myself creatively. I also know that after I've knitted, I feel better than before I started. And maybe if the day's not going so well, and things are giving me a lot of grief, going and sitting in my studio away from the domestic environment and knitting on my hard chair makes me feel a hell of a lot better. But the fantastic, or not fantastic, the ironic thing about all this work that Betsan Corkhill has done is that when she was taking this notion of therapeutic knitting to the medical world, she found that no one wanted to listen because they couldn't, the professionals couldn't consider knitting as part of treatment. They literally found the term too woolly. And so she came up with a more scientific kind of description of what it is to circumvent those prejudices. And so the term she uses is a bilateral rhythmic psychosocial intervention. And the important thing about knitting is that it uses both hands, both arms, um, and that it crosses the midline of the body. But one of the things that I really love that she said in this interview I heard, and it is mentioned in the book and on the website, is that real strength comes from flexibility, not rigidity. Knitting creates strong, resilient, flexible fabric. And therapeutic knitting seeks to create strong, resilient, flexible minds in the process. And this idea of the kind of therapeutic benefits of knitting and I suppose needlecraft has been taken on board by an animator called Samantha Moore. And she's used Betsan Corkhill's research to frame her BAFTA-nominated animation Visible Mending. And this is a lovely film that you can see on YouTube. It's a short documentary and it presents the therapeutic benefits of knitting, the way we can repair ourselves through the activity, even when we can't be mended. And she interviews a number of individuals who've used knitting as a therapeutic tool, and each individual is represented by a different knitted or crocheted character, but it has the individual voice. The individual voice is talking through the character. So I really encourage you to look at that. This is the front of my current sketchbook, Weapons of Mass Creation. There are lots of fantastic kind of statements around knitting, jokes and memes around knitting. This is one of my favorite. And as I said before, humor is a large part of my work. I find it allows me to present my audience with difficult subject matter without scaring them off. And I use both knitting and humor to disarm people. They're my weapons for survival and creation. Because knitting is associated with and commonly practiced by older women, it is derided and assumed to be easy. Many people who've knitted for years will dismiss their skill. This is disingenuous. Knitting is a skill. It's difficult. It's difficult to learn. It's difficult to be good at. And if you follow knitting patterns, you'll also know that it has its own, it has its own language, which, like any language, you have to learn to read. In Esther Rutter's book, The Golden Fleece, A Journey Through Britain's Knitted History, she compares knitting needles to magic wands, and there is a magic to knitting. But as I've already pointed out, it is a magic, so you have to know how to cast. It's not a magic that happens by itself. And I often wonder if it's a coincidence that as a knitter you cast on, and as a witch you cast spells. Historically, witches supposedly had their own types of needles made of glass, and you can see them here. These are from the collection of the Museum of Witchcraft that I've just mentioned that I used to visit when I was a child. The V&A have a pair, and I now have two pairs. And according to Cecil Williamson, who was the English folk magician and MI6 operative who founded the Museum of Witchcraft in 1951, he did some research into this area and he wrote, West Country witches retain a strong Celtic tradition in much of their spell-making incantations, such as repeating a thing over and over and over again. So using witches' knitting needles, which must be blunt, thick, and made from glass, they repeat the spell stitch by stitch. Black wool for cursing or revenge magic, and other colours in keeping related to the work in hand for beneficial magic making. When the spell is regarded as being really strong, the knitting is taken off the needles and burnt. And apparently glass needles like this were sold at country fairs in the 1800s, and they were referred to as the devil's knitting needles. And witchcraft has always featured strongly in my imagination, and I think part of that is because of my childhood visits to the Museum of Witchcraft. And a couple of years ago, I exhibited in a group exhibition called I Put a Spell on You, New Magic and Mysticism. And this was at the Art Exchange, which was the gallery at the University of Essex, which is, like many college and university galleries, has just been shut. And the exhibition explored today's growing affinity with magic, which coincides with a time when we're witnessing a profound loss of faith in modern society. Rationalism, science, and the progress of the modern era have left us lurching from one crisis to the next. And while climate catastrophe calls into question our relationship with planet Earth, against this backdrop, magic offers us an alternative universe, a space where we can become re-enchanted with the world again. And the artists in this show embrace magic, myth, and mysticism, exploring other ways of thinking and being. And they the gallery, as I said, was at the University of Essex, and Essex is always, witches are always at close hand in Essex, where hundreds stood accused because of the self-appointed witchfinder general who accused hundreds of people of witchcraft in the Essex area. This is another piece from the show. It's called Griselda from 2016, and it's a repurposed lace glove with flints that I found on when I've been walking on the farm, flints in the shape of witches' fingers. And that's another one of the other objects that I collect is stones, particularly stones in the shape of other things. Knitted jumpers. As a knitter, I obviously love knitted jumpers. And I want to share with you a body of work called Someone Else's Dream. And like my series entitled Knitted Homes of Crime, it takes a genre of hand knitting and subverts it. So this is a series, Knitted Homes of Crime, which was done in 2002. These subverted the knitted tea cozy that you do still often find if you go to traditional country fairs or look in very traditional kind of knitting pattern books where the patterns are for objects that you might sell at a bazaar or Christmas fair or school fete. I still find these when I go to fetes or, when I'm looking in old knitting pattern books. And in this series of work, the Knitted Tico's houses are true representations of homes of female killers or houses where they committed their crimes. So this project required a huge amount of research. I was looking for female killers, but female killers who acted alone, who didn't act supported by men. Sometimes I found books with images of houses. Sometimes I had to go and visit the houses. And I had a really fantastic process where I would produce the knitting pattern and I would pass it to, as it says here, my knitter, Jean Arkell. And I would send Jean the wool, I'd send her the pattern, I'd send her the story. And she would always contact me and tell me what a dreadful story it was. And then she would knit the pieces for the houses, send them back to me, and I would sew them up and make them into tea cozies. And one thing that's super important to me is crediting people I work with. I think we often see work in art galleries. It's rife in the fashion industry where work is marketed under an individual's name, but actually it's someone else's hands that have created the work. And this is particularly true of knitwear, that you will see credited to designers where actually it's someone else that has made the work, nearly always nearly always a woman's hands. And so I'm very keen to always credit the people that I collaborate with. So in Someone Else's Dream, which is a more recent series made between 2014 and 2016, I was working with found knitted jumpers that I was buying predominantly on eBay. So I was making use of hand knitted novelty sweaters or picture knits, as I always called them. And when I was a teenager, these were super popular. And as I showed you earlier on, Patricia Roberts, who was my favorite knitwear designer, she produced a lot of picture knits. And it was actually with a picture knit that I won the knitwear design competition when I was 18. I knitted, as you saw, I knitted a mohair sweater that looked like a kind of tails and bow tie. And so when I was, as I said, before I'd won that competition, I had knitted a very complicated Patricia Roberts novelty sweater called Tarzan, which had a monkey on it eating a banana with a 3D banana skin. And I must have knitted that when I was about 17. And for some reason, I threw it away. I gave it away. I held on to it for about 20 years and then gave it away. And then I guess about 15 years later, I really regretted it. And I started trying to see if I could find it on eBay and to buy it back. I didn't, but I did start finding lots of other of these picture knits. And as I tried to hunt down my Patricia Roberts sweater, I realised that there were loads of sweaters that had these idyllic countryside scenes knitted into them, countryside sweaters. They're portraying idyllic rural landscapes and farmhouses, animals, villages complete with churches, rolling hills, fluffy clouds. And sometimes I would find the pattern for the jumper that had been knitted as well. And so this project, I made this project not long after we'd moved to Essex. And it really tapped into a frustration that I had about our move to the countryside. And it refers to the idealized view that many people have of living in the countryside. When I was living in London, particularly after I had my daughter, I met so many people who said they wanted to leave. They wanted cheaper housing, they wanted a garden, they wanted to have a dog, they wanted to have more children, supposedly better schooling, less crime, greater personal safety. There was a massive. It just seemed to be the constant chat. Um, but this was a kind of dream that I didn't share. It was someone else's dream. So in this series of works, I've Swiss darned, which is an embroidery stitch that mimics a knitted stitch on top of the countryside scenes on these jumpers to change the idyllic picturesque scenes to scenes of misery that can and do happen in the countryside. So the scenes that I've embroidered are from personal experience, some from news stories, some from things that have happened very locally to where we live. They've all happened in the countryside. So I've embroidered a car crash, figure hanging from a tree, house fire, body drowned in a river, fly tipping, crime investigation scene complete with white tent, police do not cross tape, police van, car and helicopter. And you can see that one here. And with all these works, I've been led by what's already on the sweater. This sweater already had the helicopter on it, and it already had the car, which I changed. And so I'm very much responding to what's on the sweater to tell my story. And obviously, the use of distressing or violent imagery when presented through a domestic, seemingly passive and benign object, such as a hand-knitted jumper, subverts our expectations of both the object and the medium employed in its production. I think it makes the imagery initially less painful to see, but ultimately much more disturbing. And also with this work, it's not lost on me that I have an invisible and anonymous collaborator in the work, the person who knitted the original jumper that I'm working on top of, and the person that I do not know. And I used a secondhand bought sweater in this work as well. This is a jumper chair made in collaboration with the designer Carl Clerkin. He had an exhibition within another exhibition. He set up a repair shop in the exhibition Eternally Yours, Care, Repair and Healing at Somerset House in London. And he invited different designers and artists to work with him in Somerset House every day. And he had also scavenged lots of kind of furniture parts from furniture companies. And together we built this chair. Knitted toys. I have a huge collection of knitted toys. So here we are. So here's me in front of a small portion of my collection when we lived in our flat in London. This is a picture from 2007. So an invitation to take part in a live printmaking project saw me break into one of my oldest and largest collections, my collection of knitted toys. And like a number of my collections, this collection also started from a dislike or a mild repulsion of the objects that I then go on to repeatedly buy. And the photographer Martin Parr, he also talked about this. His hatred of Margaret Thatcher motivated him to collect her memorabilia. And he talks about this in the catalogue for a show called Magnificent Obsessions that was held at the Barbican Art Gallery in 2015. I'm a massive fan of Martin Parr's. And unlike many collectors, I'm not motivated through the ownership of the rare or the beautiful or the valuable. I'm interested in the everyday, the overlooked, and the undervalued. And really, I like to collect things that are easy to find. So knitted toys fitted they fit all my knitting requirements, especially as I love knitting. And people seem to like knitting toys. Also, the quantity of patterns and toys that I've managed to buy indicate, but I'm really not convinced that children actually like them. I think they're yet another thing that people like to knit as opposed to a thing that people like to receive. And to my mind, they're fairly perverse and abject objects. And there's an American artist called Mike Kelly who also had this feeling about knitted and crocheted objects. Um, he was a very influential American artist, a pioneer of abject art, who highlighted the irrational and the repulsive. And in his work from 1987 that we can see here, More Love Hours Than Can Ever Be Repaid, he questioned the ideals of minimalism, producing work that conveyed an aura of emotional and spiritual disillusionment. And the title of the work also suggests wasted hours, wasted effort, the long hours of stitching that were required to create the toys and blankets that were then discarded and that he then used in this piece of work. Mike Kelly was an incisive commentator on American class and popular culture, and he really rebelled against minimalism, which was the dominant aesthetic of the time in America, where less is supposedly more. Very sadly, Kelly took his own life in 2012, and a spontaneous memorial in the form of a shrine was set up in an abandoned carport near to his LA studio, referencing more love hours than could ever be repaid. With friends and colleagues and former students and fans, leaving Afghan rugs and knitted and crocheted objects in his memory. And Mike Kelly had a show at Tate Modern last year, but very sadly, More Love Hours Than Can Ever Be Repaid was not in that show. So in 2016, I was invited to take part in an exhibition called Big Steam Print at Ditchley Museum of Art and Craft in East Sussex. This was a kind of crazy project for me to be asked to take part in. I was asked to take part alongside some super renowned printmakers. And I'm not a printmaker, but somehow I got included in this list. And the project was to use a vintage steamroller as a printing press to publicly produce enormous prints, performance printmaking. And you can see that here. So on the left-hand side, you can see me laying down some of my toy collection that I've inked up. And then we put plastic and a big tarp over the top of it. And then the steamroller drove over it and drove back again. So this was a 2 meter long print. And this was such a fantastic project in the end. The audience were really in it with me. I hadn't really thought about what it would be like to make work in front of other people. I'm naturally quite an introverted person. I like a lot of time on my own. I like to make work in my studio, unwatched. And this I was fully on display. So the great thing about this was that when as you can see here, I'm lifting up the print in the end image, and it was a big crowd pleaser. As I was, as we were driving the steamroller over the toys, people were shouting, "Don't do it!" Yeah, it was great, and so I did it twice. And this work I called More Love Hours as a tribute to Mike Kelly. And there was so much interest in this kind of printed work that I've since produced a series of prints, but I've been using a more conventional letterpress as opposed to using a steamroller, which, funnily enough, I don't have to hand. So this is me in a local print studio printing up from individual toys, and you can see there's one of a toy monkey that's hanging up in the background. And this is a series of them printed. And what I really loved about this was, I suppose, being offered a project where I'm just thinking, why did you ask me? I don't print. And being really pushed out from my comfort zone and being forced to think about other ways of working, and then being surprised, being really genuinely surprised at the outcome and the reception. And I've since worked with another organisation called Art at Home to turn these into tea towels, where I've put them into repeat, and had them digitally printed onto linen. The Perfect. So The Perfect was a project that I began in 2007, but it was just not the perfect project, and I've been trying to end it perfectly ever since. I suppose I do suffer from perfectionism. I'm trying to ditch it. after I completed this project, I wrote perfectionism is associated with good craftsmanship, something supposedly to aspire to. I aim for perfection in all aspects of my life, my work, and myself. It can be very debilitating and exhausting and is, of course, unachievable. So the project enabled me to work with automated digital knitting technology. And right at the beginning, I showed you those knitted eyes that were done on a digital jacquard machine. And here I was working with highly skilled technicians who could undertake the programming of the machinery and run it for me. And this was produced at the University of Manchester. This piece is called Anyway from 2002, and it's installed in a solo show that I had a long time ago, but is now in the collection of the Castle Museum, Nottingham. And this piece of work is produced on a whole garment machine. And these machines, they look just like any regular knitting machine, but they're capable of knitting a sweater with no seams. The sweater just comes off the machine as one. Witchcraft. And so the perfect, this is called the perfect pair. So in the perfect project, what I wanted to do was to see if I could get one of these, a knitting machine, to kind of birth a body, to knit a complete life-size three-dimensional human body or skin. I've been knitting some of these kind of bodies myself on domestic knitting machines, and I wanted to see if the machine could do that. And I suppose what happened with this project was that the mental image I had of the body coming off the machine was very strong, but the actual visuals of it happening didn't bear any relationship to the mental image I had of it. So as I said, I worked with a technician to help me write the program and to knit the bodies that just simply dropped off the machine. But when I say simply, I mean like 2 hours after they started knitting them. It's not a super quick process for these pieces of work. It was very time consuming and actually very expensive. And in the end, I found this project deeply unsatisfactory. It was physically unsatisfactory for me because I didn't get to interact with the materials. There was no process. I didn't get to touch the yarn. I didn't get to move the machinery. And aesthetically unsatisfactory because they were just too flat. They were too much fine knitted wool. No stitch definition, no texture. But by the end of this project, I'd produced quite a large number of these skins, but I really struggled to take ownership of these works. And I felt the need to interact physically with them, to handle them, to rework them, to own them. And this kind of, I suppose this has resulted in years and years of me trying to find ways for them to work, to get these to work for me and for me to feel like I have some kind of ownership. And this was one intervention that I had. I worked with Celia Pym, who's an artist that works with darning, and I gave her some of the skins that hadn't knitted well, that had got holes in them and drop stitches, the work that the technician was particularly dissatisfied with and would otherwise have thrown out. And so Celia darned the holes, repairing them sensitively, but obviously not masking the holes, and not trying to make the work appear perfect, using different coloured wool to highlight the imperfections and the repair. And the tension between the machine knitted wool and the hand darned area really pleased me. It brought the hand and machine together, making the bodies more tactile and more human. The imperfect bodies were more perfect for me than the perfect bodies. So this series of work, Celia and I called The Imperfect. And my inability to resolve the work saw me taking quite desperate measures. I started filling the skins with expanding builder's foam, which is a really horrible material. And also in desperation, when I'd filled them with the builder's foam, they still weren't working. I took a bread knife to them and sawed the bodies up into different parts. And this work is a serendipitous meeting between a knitted head that had been filled with expanding foam, and this basket that had been lying around. And I'd been given a basket of flowers as a gift, but then when the flowers died, I was just left with this basket and had no use for it. But also, I just felt bad about throwing it away, just so wasteful. I don't like it and I have no use for it, but I was also aware that somewhere in the world someone had made this basket using great skill, using their hands. I couldn't make this basket. And the head is one that was sawn off one of the bodies, completely unsuccessful intervention with the work. But the head sat perfectly within the arc of the handle of the basket. So I devised a way of suspending it with a simple crochet technique and lurex yarn, more inherited materials. And I also crocheted a lace edge onto the base of the basket, I suppose in honor of all those lace doilies that have been crocheted throughout the years and sit underneath ornaments, bowls, and baskets around the world. Again, objects that are often derided, but objects that require skill. They require skill to make these things. And basket case is a derogatory name for a personal thing regarded as useless or unable to cope. And Bad Mother is another work made from one of the sawn off limbs. It's made from one of the arms that I'd sawn when I'd sawn the body out. And with this work, I pushed a bunch of broken and bent knitting needles into the end of the arm, embellished it with red lurex tubular knitting, spelling out the word Bad Mother. And the O of the mother has been turned into a sequined eye, crying crystal tears, the repeat of the eye imagery. And the phrase bad mother comes from something that was said to me one Christmas many years ago when my daughter was at primary school. She had a classroom assistant who loved to knit. And she had said that she would knit my daughter a cardigan because she knew that I would never get round to knitting my daughter anything useful. And on Christmas Eve, her husband brought it over. And as he handed me the package, he said two words, not happy Christmas, but bad mother. Mothers who knit are supposed to knit for their offspring. And going back to Esther Rutter's book, This Golden Fleece, A Journey Through Britain's Knitted History, she writes, knitting for babies exerts one of the strongest pulls between the knitter and her needles. Well, that's not for me. When I was pregnant, I was continually being asked what I'd knitted my baby. People would say, oh, I expect she's got the most amazing array of knitted items, and she had nothing.
Freddie, I just wanted to give you a little heads up
Yeah,
time-wise.
yeah, thank
It's
you.
7:20 now. But
Okay, when did you want to finish, Katie?
well, I think we haven't had any questions come through
Okay,
in the chat. So do you
yeah,
want to go on another couple of minutes
yeah,
and
sure,
we'll go to 7:24 and then
sure,
take questions? Yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, definitely. So as I was saying, I hadn't knitted or anything. Um, but I did, in the end, I did give knit her something on my knitting machine because I couldn't bear the expectation anymore. Um, so I think I have now resolved those skins. This this is them, some of them installed in 2019. I think that project is resolved. I think it is now ended. Um, and I suppose the way I resolved it was just by letting the skins do what they do. The skins are stitched together by their fingers and feet, and they're just suspended. They're not filled with builder's foam. They don't have some kind of difficult structure to hold them up. They just hang, just letting gravity take its, just letting gravity do the work. So this piece is called It's All the Same. And I suppose this was when I really started to think about the notion of soft. And the title of this talk is Who's Scared of the Soft Stuff? I suppose as I've moved through my career, I've come to really realize that in the art world is scared of soft stuff. It likes hard stuff. It likes stuff that can be hung on the wall or stuff that can stand up. It doesn't like or can't cope with or doesn't know how to deal with stuff that won't hold its form. This piece is called Fire, and I like the floppy eye earlier on. It's just suspended with nails on the wall, and it just does what it does. And the longer it hangs, the longer the work gets. So I suppose for the past few years, I've now been researching and writing about softness while simultaneously hand knitting with the softest yarns I could buy. They might be natural or they might be man-made. And this is another digital work, Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And this is hanging, this is a 3 meter high piece of work. And it's supposed to hang flat against the wall like a tapestry, but of course it doesn't because it's knitted and knitting doesn't hang flat. It flares out at the bottom. And something that happened when I sent this off to be exhibited in an exhibition supposedly about the medium of textiles, I received a query from the curators and they asked me, we're hanging your work today and would like to know how you feel about the textiles. It is warping at the bottom. What do you suggest? And I wrote back, that's fine, it's floppy textiles, so the warping is what it does. In my current work, I'm embracing the quality and behaviours of fabric instead of trying to control it and make it behave like more conventional and accepted material used in the production of artworks. Don't be afraid. And to credit my collaborator on this, the drawing in the background was a drawing that my daughter did when she was very young. And then it's overlaid with some of my handwritten text. I hate working digitally. I only use it so I can get the work produced. And so all the artwork for this is done by hand and then scanned into a computer so that I can kind of tidy it up and get it ready to be knitted. We might just whiz through some of these. These are other works that explore this idea of softness and looking at camelids, the animals that give us super soft fiber, llama, baby alpaca, and alpaca. And here I'm using the fiber from the camelid to knit something that looks like the camelid, and again returning to this use of found discarded material. Sticks and Stones, this is my very last series that I'm going to talk about. This title comes from the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Yeah, but of course they do. Names really hurt. And in this work, I was thinking about how people don't know how to read material objects. As a society, we've long privileged sight over other senses, and generally we value and trust the written word above all else. And I love writing, but it does distract me from making. Words are so dominant. And in Crafts magazine put together a power list in 2018 of the 20 most influential people in British craft. And in this list, the top 2 were writers, with the top 4 all published authors. I found this deeply depressing. It appeared that to be taken seriously, to kind of hold status, you had to have written. It wasn't enough to make. And I also found it deeply depressing that there was no one in the list that had a practice committed to textiles, perpetuating the belief that textiles is a benign media. So the undervaluing of material expression, particularly soft ones, super frustrates me. It's made, and these knitted words, I suppose, express a lot of that anger. I've been knitting words that have words in them. I do enjoy wordplay, but I've been knitting words that have words related to anger or rage. So this is courage with the word rage in it. And then I've got discomfort and danger. And anger is viewed as a negative emotion, especially when expressed by women. And craft, as I spoke about earlier on, is currently promoted as an activity to enhance well-being, soothing and calming. I love the notion that you would use a technique that is calming and soothing to express anger. I enjoy the subversion and irony within that. And just because life is sweet and sometimes serendipity happens, I'm flying to Oslo tomorrow because I've been asked to speak in a seminar about anger. And Johnny Rotten, as we all know, famously sang "Anger is an Energy" and used it as the title of his biography. And so my final quotation to you is what I'm going to speak about tomorrow. Don't view anger negatively. Don't deny it. Use it to be creative. So I think now I've probably moved off softness, now embracing anger and humor. I think that's where I'm going to end. Yes, so that was me. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Freddie. Could listen to you for hours. Well, listen and watch. We have a few questions that have come through
Great.
the chat. I'll just
Okay.
let people know we've I think we should be able to go on for another 10 minutes before Zoom kicks us out.
Hmm.
So I will just apologise in advance if someone is in the middle of talking and then all of a sudden Zoom kicks us all out. We'll just kind of make the use of the time that we've got left.
Hmm.
So, first question we've got, which we'll take from chat first, was from Ruth. And Ruth asked if you find it easy to let go and move on when work doesn't turn out how you thought it would.
No, I hate unresolved things. I have sometimes I put things away for a while. I have been known to put work away for years and then get it out again. Sometimes you just have to wait. I made a piece of work called I'm So Bloody Sad, and I just couldn't get it to work. And I must have put it away for about 8 years. And then when I got it out again, it seemed to be working. So sometimes I think it's about just wait, just time, just waiting and time, and not trying to rush to come to a conclusion. But I don't like I don't like anything unresolved. I always want to tidy everything up. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Freddie. Um, and then Sue said, oh no, hang on, have I jumped? Yeah, Sue says she'd like to ask about softness. Sue, did you want
Mm.
to elaborate on that at
Yeah,
all?
I mean, I loved your talk. I also have to say, I
Oh,
also went to the Mr. Potter's Museum as a child, and
oh, did
that's where
you?
my witchcraft one was. My grandparents were they run the tea cafe for the coach drivers for something called
Oh,
Walnut Gardens, which
amazing.
was a
Oh,
really weird place. But yes, so my childhood was similar. But
oh, I love the way we have a shared childhood
yeah,
experiences. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. So it was very resonant. But
Mm.
I also I read your piece in text recently. The text I was
Oh,
very
thank
on
you.
softness, and I mean, I did love it very much, and I also found it a really good counterbalance to an essay that you don't cite, but by Adamson called Soft Power.
Hmm. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
I mean, which I found a kind of mansplaining version of
Yeah, yeah.
softness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always.
And,
Yeah.
and if people who don't know, he's up. It starts. It's about dicks, and so he goes on really. But I think he thinks he's an ally of women, doesn't he? It's kind of. But I just wonder how. I mean, the play of softness is kind of. It's very strongly gendered, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's also possible to be quite angry with softness, but
Yeah.
um,
No, I agree. And I think it's very easy to push it away or deny it because it's hard to deal with and because it's
yeah,
undervalued. Um,
yeah.
but that's why I really like what Betsan Corkill writes about the flexibility of knitting and the soft knit,
Mm.
and then the flexibility of the mind. And of course,
Yeah,
we need both things in life. We need hard and soft, but they're not valued. They're still not valued equally,
no, but the
unless
trick,
it's
yeah, yeah,
unless it's in a cashmere sweater, and then we do want it soft.
yeah, yeah,
But in everything else in life, it's a really I think it is super undervalued.
mm,
Um, and I suppose giving into it has been a fantastic liberation for me.
mm,
Just saying this is what it does instead of trying to make it
yeah, yeah, no,
stand up like a conventional sculpture.
yeah,
Just sticking by it and just being
mm,
confident in the fact that
yeah,
it doesn't offer maybe what the conventional world, the kind of conventional gallery or art owner wants to own. You just do it anyway.
yeah. There are
And
the picoteurs, the old women who round guillotines knitting away,
yes, absolutely. Yeah,
knitting
exactly.
needles as a weapon. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's interesting about Glenn Adamson, who is a
mm,
commentator, particularly on craft.
yeah, mm,
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that comes back to what I was saying about the artisan and crafts, where the voices that were being listened to were writers
yeah,
as opposed to makers. And
mm,
yes, of course, he's got interesting to say things to say, but he's not a
yeah,
maker.
no,
He's come through a world of words,
mm,
not a world of this.
yeah, yeah.
And
And,
so to me, it's that's less valuable.
and there's also the kind of crafts councils. It's ceramics is way
Yeah.
above. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's
Mm,
nice and hard, isn't it? I mean, I know it starts soft, but it's nice and hard, and people can own it easily because they can dust it.
mm,
Yeah, but ceramics is so frustrating for me because you always
mm.
have to work with the color of the clay and then apply color.
Yeah,
And the
yeah, no,
beauty of
yeah.
working with fiber is
Mm,
like you're touching and seeing the color all the time. You're living in the color. It's just fantastic. And so for me, ceramics never, although I own some ceramics, working with clay it'll never do it for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Sue.
you.
I
Do
wonder
you want me
as
to take the
well
next one?
oh, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry,
No, go on. No,
I was
it's
going to
fine.
do
I
the
just
next
didn't want you
one.
to have to do it
Yeah.
all, Katie. No,
I'm
you go.
just
You go.
wondering as well if that, if any of that sort of perception around the value was to do with the cost of the materials
Mhm.
and the cost of space and equipment that I mean like because knitting especially in the 70s like it was to do with the common market wasn't it? It was
Mhm.
why everybody did it but actually now wool is quite pricey unless
Yeah,
you
really.
go
Yeah.
to
I mean, if you
Osman's.
buy good wool, it's super expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cheaper to buy something.
Yeah, should be better valued purely on that basis.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
so the next question we had one from Barbara. Um, should I go ahead and read that one, Barbara? Or do you think it was fully resolved,
I
or
think I think it's been resolved. I
you're there?
think it's been
Okay.
covered. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So on to Hannah's question. Thank you, Hannah, which was
Yeah.
have you seen a resurgence or new popularity amongst your students in using knitting as a material or process for their artistic practice?
Mm,
And Hannah says that when she was at uni studying fine art, 2011 to 15, it was very, very
mhm.
rare. She still struggles to find knitting and crochet in the fine art space.
Yeah, I mean, I actually teach on a textiles program, and so it's not context specific. And what I love about that is we have designers studying alongside artists, or maybe alongside researchers who are looking at new materials. But when I look at the students in some of the fine art programs, yeah, textiles does seem to be, well, at the Royal College, it is completely accepted in those other areas. I think it probably wasn't I think it wasn't then, like what you're talking about. I think it's relatively recently that the tutors in those programs are beginning to think that's okay. But I think it also depends on the age of the tutors. I mean, I had a conversation with a super successful artist who works with rug tufting and like rug hooking and tufting by hand. And when she was studying at Manchester, she got masses of criticism for using textiles within the fine art programs, and particularly from female staff. Um, with all that kind of internalized misogyny and trying to fit in and trying to fit into a world where you're not going to fit in. You just have to make it your world. Yeah, so I think there definitely is a resurgence of interest, which is exciting. But whether it'll be something that will stay, I don't really know. Um, yeah, we do have some super successful students working, who go out and work in that area. Yeah, it's interesting to see the kind of things moving around and coming around again. Because when I studied on my degree, I also studied tapestry. And so there was a lot of tapestry courses in the kind of 80s, which have in in higher education, those kind of courses have predominantly disappeared, apart from possibly, West Dean, where Philip Sanderson teaches. But there's a massive resurgence of interest in tapestry as well. Uh, yeah, we'll see. Watch this space. We'll see what happens. I mean, I think I just do what I do. To be honest, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what other people think. It's that thing about fitting in. It's fine. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Freddie. Can I just, and I think, sorry, I'm full of cold, so I sound really.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um, and I think it's really interesting, isn't it? I didn't start knitting until like 2019, so I'm left-handed, and my mom was like, "I'll never be able to teach you because I don't know how to do." So she did teach me in 2019. And it's interesting how I like learnt as an adult, and actually, even though it is such a, we all know that it's a very, it's a craft that needs a lot of skill and intelligence and maths and STEM. A lot of people that actually are knitters come from a STEM background, kind of, or even if they knit as a hobby, they've got maybe a profession in
Mhm.
STEM, more so than I find like my arty friends. Like it's more my friends who are doctors and kind of engineers and stuff. but it's interesting how actually, in order to start it, like you said, it has its own language, and you almost need that domestic space to learn. You need
Mm-hmm.
somebody in your family to teach you or go to a class because it's not, I mean, I've looked for machine knitting classes and they're £400 a pop and they're in London and there's two of them. So it's actually something that even though it really should be on the platform of white cube galleries and that type of thing. And it should be commandeered, it should be commandeered by the art world, I guess, and said like, yeah, this deserves to be up there. It also really relies on the just oh my gosh, the domestic space in order
Mm-hmm.
to grow, I guess, at this level. I mean, I don't know what really point I'm making with that, but I just thought it was interesting how it goes across all those worlds, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that knitting is, it exists very heavily in all kinds of industrial areas as well, like, textiles for healthcare or textiles for motor car interiors. It has lots of, because of its kind of stretchy properties, it has huge potential for lots and lots of different applications where it hasn't quite gone yet. Yeah, and I think, I mean, I find that I have to learn from someone teaching me. I can't learn from a book or even from watching a video. I need to learn in three-dimensional space. I need to be able to move around it and experience it. And I do think that, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think the domestic space does offer that time and ability to learn. Um, but I guess, I mean, it is exciting that more people are learning because then hopefully that will be continue to be shared in the domestic space. And I think we did for a while really undervalue what was learned in the domestic space. It was almost like you had to go out of the home and go to an institution to learn something for it to be valuable. But one of the things that I think that has happened about the cost of studying is that people are starting to learn things in other ways. Whilst that's not great for institutions that, less people can afford to go and study and might not take it on. They might want to, but they don't want to take it on. It does offer lots of other opportunities for learning. And I think beginning to really value what can be learned in the home and what is passed on from generation to generation. Yeah, it'd be super interesting to see how this, what happens in the future as we move forward.
Thank you, Freddie. Yeah, I would
Pleasure.
hate to see it kind of get completely hijacked by the coding and
Mm.
technical world of machine knitting and sort of, the maths and the coding sort of suddenly, well, that's valuable now. And
I don't, I mean, I really, years and years ago when I was first started teaching, I was really frustrated with a student. And one of these members of staff said to me, people do what people do. And I never really understood what he meant, but people do just do what people do. Like I think people have always knitted. It's just become more visible again. And shows like the Knitting and Stitching Show, which is an amazing show that happens in Ali Pali in London and it goes to Harrogate and Dublin, I believe. It's always had masses of footfall, even when knitting wasn't supposedly fashionable. It was a huge footfall. And when you go now, it's a crazy footfall. But of course, a lot of the people that go are people that society don't value as well as they should. They're older women like me. People don't value them. And so you become invisible. But these, we're out there. There are a lot of us. Get used to it.
yeah,
We've got
you're
time.
visible to us, Freddie.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And we've got time and we've got power, and I really enjoy that. And actually, I quite enjoy being invisible.
No, there's a power to being able to sort of move between those spaces as well, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much, everybody. It was great hanging out with you all
Yeah,
on
thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Wednesday
It's been
thanks.
wonderful. And thank you for having your cameras on. It's really nice to see your faces.
Yeah, and
Thanks, Freddie.
My
we will be
pleasure.
in contact with a short email shortly.
Yeah.
And you should all have our emails if you got any questions and you want to check something out. Just send an email to us and we can do what we can do. But it's been an absolute delight. Which
It
is
really
not
has.
something I would
Me
not
too.
has.
It's been really great. What a nice way to spend the evening talking about my work.
Yeah.
My God.
So interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We can all go
Thanks,
off and watch
Freddie.
Traitors now.
Oh, yeah, so
no,
we
I'm not,
can. It's
I'm not
Wednesday.
watching Traitors.
Oh, I am.
Yeah,
There's no
well, me
true
too.
crime in that. I can't be watching that.
Thank you, Freddie.
Thank
Have a
you.
lovely
Yeah,
time
thank
in
you,
Oslo.
Freddie.
My pleasure.
Night all.
We'll be in touch
Thanks
soon, Katie,
all.
yeah?
Bye.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye
I meant to
bye.
meet,
Bye.
hadn't I? That's what I meant to do.
Yeah.